Man, look at the size difference between these two things. You have to adjust your striking style to prepare for this tiny little glove. Look at this, 4 ounces. Ah, that one's so much better. It's got padding, I can push, it's squishy. This one's like a little rock. Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to talk about preparing for MMA striking as a kickboxer and why some fighters, high-level kickboxers who have transitioned to MMA have succeeded while others have struggled. And we're going to talk about what changes I made in my training camp to prepare for MMA striking. First off, let's talk about 2 very high-level kickboxers who are now in the UFC. First is Israel Adesanya, and the second is Gokhan Saki. They both left kickboxing at the top of the sport, but only one of them has had a great deal of success in the cage. Why is that? Well, first, certain striking styles suit MMA. The Israel striking style suits MMA very well because he's very tricky and elusive, and he very rarely, except for his last fight, gets hit with lots of clean shots. Saki's MMA style is still very reminiscent of Dutch kickboxing. His stance is still around shoulder width, and his hands are held quite high. But the very first thing I noticed in training camp was how much easier it was to get hit and how the defense changed with the small 4-ounce gloves. You cannot turtle shell up without getting clipped if 5 or 6 punches are thrown in a combination. Instead, movement with your feet and your head becomes so important. In kickboxing, you can just shell up and stand your ground. I feel like if somebody doesn't recognize that you have to switch your striking style to suit MMA, there's a strong likelihood they will get KO'd eventually. And with that kickboxing narrow stance, yes, you can move around quickly, but there's a strong likelihood you're gonna get taken down eventually. And it becomes very difficult to effectively sprawl and defend those takedowns. So changing the hand positioning from here to out there, and changing your stance from shoulder width and short to longer and slightly more narrow, I believe are paramount to getting that win in MMA. Or at least that's how I approach the training camp that I just had. I also noticed that the fight output has to change. If you are too aggressive with your combination attacks, you just keep pushing and pushing with the combinations, you are more likely to get countered, more likely to get laid out. But for me, even scarier, you are more open to the takedowns. And I've already made this mistake just in one fight. I hurt him to the body, I think. I got excited, I started pressuring forward, and he bounced off the cage and got a takedown, and I ended up on my back. MMA is all about landing that one fantastic shot, maybe 2 fantastic shots. Whereas normally in kickboxing, I'm looking to damage people with combination work and to find little holes in between that tight turtle shell guard. And because the gloves are smaller and you're looking for that one big punch knockout to finish the fight, you have to be much more cautious. As a result, the pace is a little bit slower. And then again, as a result, you have to start using fakes. Throwing lots of fakes is not really my style. I tried to implement it in training camp. I utilized it a little bit in the fight, but not nearly enough. I want to get to the point where my shadow boxing, my bag work, everything looks more like this. Always making the guy a little hesitant to throw because I'm constantly throwing the fakes and making him scared. You have to fake in MMA. You have to use that tactical advantage to make sure your opponent is on edge all the time. I also noticed that in MMA, the body is not attacked as frequently as I think it should be. Somebody like Gokhan Saki was really good at throwing body shots in kickboxing, but as far as I remember in his MMA fights, he wasn't really targeting the body. And because fighters keep their hands pretty high and not tight, the body is open. And I was able to take advantage of that in my fight and find some shots that really changed the pace and really slowed him down and ultimately really won me the fight. So for me, the big difference between kickboxing striking and MMA striking is number 1, take your stance and elongate it, but narrow it to defend from those takedowns. Number 2, take your hands away from your head, put them out a little bit further so you can pick away at shots, and you can also use the lead arm to crossface if they come for the takedown. That was a big element for me in my training camp. No longer bringing my left hand straight from here, straight out, and that's all I'm thinking about. I also had to be ready to drop the hand and stuff that bicep into their face if they shot in. I also had to remember to utilize much more fakes, but at the same time, not to work combinations quite as much and not to be pressuring forward quite as much during my combinations. This first fight was a massive challenge for me, but a great learning experience. And I really think the next fight won't necessarily be easier. I'm just gonna get that much better and that much better and that much better rapidly. Because realistically, kickboxers have amazing striking. Some of the best strikers in the world, no question. We just have to make small transitions, small adjustments to make sure that when we get in the cage, we're still effective and we're not putting ourselves in a position where we can get taken down or we might get clipped with a single shot because our hands are in this kickboxing position. So I just wanted to take a moment and show you guys the changes that I made in my training camp striking wise to prepare for this MMA fight. I hope you found all those things helpful. If you're thinking of making the transition, try and implement a few of those small changes and I think they'll make a world of difference. I'm back to kickboxing for my next fight, so I'm gonna return to my normal style, but at the same time, I'm gonna keep in my head, how do I train for that MMA fight? And when I get back to my next one, my next training camp for MMA, I'm gonna make sure that that brain is still firing in the right way, and I'm gonna be ready when I step in right away to make that transition. Thanks for watching today, guys. I hope you found this a little bit insightful and you enjoyed learning about my take on the transition from one style to the other, only in terms of striking. I'll be sure to do another video on, I think, maybe the 3 or 5 most important things that I trained for this whole camp in regards to wrestling, jiu-jitsu, striking. I'll break it all down, the 3 or 5 most important things that I trained in this camp for my first MMA fight. That'll be coming up next week. Make sure you get subscribed and I'll see you back here again soon.